cook now. Let him cook. I said let him cook.
Our head coach of our local football program, Bronco Mental.
The details themselves with the right preparation can separate you from mediocre competitors that don't do that. And so, yeah, the attention to detail, I think, drives the execution, or should I say brings the execution to life, especially in critical moments.
Welcome to the Morning Howl. My name is Ryan Tamori. Nothing like getting kicked off with technical issues. This is a UNM pregame show, and right now it's football. Basketball's right around the corner. I hope everybody is enjoying the chillier weather. And you're all royally F this morning because you have 3 St. Pius alumni. All right, 9:30. Obviously, we're going to break down UNM's game today in Fort Collins. I'm not talking trash. Fort Collins is a very lovely city, so I'm sure we're having people from Colorado watch. If you're watching from Colorado, I'm harder on UNM than probably anybody else. I'm objective. Today's game at 3 p.m. Mountain Time. Bronco Mendenhall takes up the Lobos to play Jay Norvell's Rams at Canvas Stadium. The game is at 3 p.m. You can listen on the Lobo Radio Network. And that is Rob Portnoy. I always catch myself trying to not say Dave Portnoy. Rob Portnoy, Dontrell Moore on the call, JJ Buck. Our friends JJ Buck, Ned James, pre-halftime, post-game show. That starts at 2, and the game is not on TV. You will have to watch it on the Mountain West Network. Again, kickoff is 3 o'clock. Today we have a special guest at, I don't even know what time it is, 9:30. Justin Michael from DNVR Rams. He covers Colorado State. He's a beat writer and podcast host. Very excited to have him on. If you know, I just lost my train of thought. Let me just introduce everybody. He's a 2-time offensive state lineman for San Juan Mendoza and the St. Pius Sartans. Happy to have him on board on this show. His name is Mr. Rick Thompson. Richard, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. The sun is shining. The birds are chirping. We have a full slate of beautiful football games on our plates today. So let's forget about politics and all the bad things and focus in on sports today, what's really important in life, and enjoy this game. I'm ready to talk about it. I think the Lobos have a fantastic opportunity today.
I do. I'm going to quote Lou Brown from, I think, Major League Two. When you win one game, it's a winning streak. Or excuse me, when you win two games, it's called a winning streak. UNM has won three in a row, quite possibly make it fourth in a row. And I really don't think Wyoming is that good. They are in Albuquerque next week. Hypothetically speaking, if UNM gets a win today, I think there's a realistic shot that they're making my head explode, that there's a realistic shot that they could win 5 in a row. And you're sitting at 5-4 and a bowl game looking at you right in the face, which I think many Lobo fans and alumni would be very happy. He hasn't been on the show. He has now been to his first funeral. He is a producer for ProView Networks. And of course, you always catch his dad on here. Haven't had him on a while. Nick Nunez. Nick, congrats on getting married. Long time, no talk, no see. How's everything going?
Appreciate you, man. Everything is going well. Exciting night for sports last night. Obviously, game 1 of the World Series. I didn't catch all of that game, but also UNLV, Boise State kind of lived up to the hype. The second half, particularly the fourth quarter, was pretty defensive oriented. But no, I echo yours and Rick's sentiments. Man, the last time UNM football was on a 3-game winning streak was 2016. So there's a lot of excitement around the program. Big game today, and ready to get into it.
Yes, I didn't queue up game 1 of the World Series. There were 5 major events in LA, one at the new Intuit Dome where the Clippers play, and Steve Ballmer probably runs around naked. I love Steve Ballmer. There was a concert at the old, which is now the Kia Forum, the Great Western Forum. The art is formerly known as the Great Western Forum. And the age-old Big Ten rivalry of Rutgers at USC was on in game 1 of the World Series, and the Lakers played. The Lakers beat the Suns. So I don't envy anybody that lived in LA, and you're talking to somebody who used to work in New York. That sounds incredibly awful. We have a lot of Dodger fans that listen to this show. I don't know how many are on right now, but when Freddie Freeman walked up, if you've been watching any amount of baseball, and I watch a copious amounts, you knew his ankle was hurt, and right when he walked up, Kirk Gibson, and I was 1.5 years old when Kirk Gibson happened in game 1 against the A's in '88, and they also beat the Mets in the NLCS that year, so it's very, very eerie. I just had visions of Kirk Gibson doing that, and he did it, and not good for us New York Yankee bettors at plus 1.5. Boise State, the game of the century of the year in the Mountain West. Boise State beats UNLV in Vegas in Allegiant Stadium. It was a UNLV football record crowd of over 42,000. I thought that Boise State did a pretty good job holding. UNLV did a pretty good job of holding Ashton Genty, Heisman Trophy candidate, in check. Nick, if you watch the game, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, Ashton Genty's longest run was of 16 yards. I mean, that being said, he still had close to, I think it was 133 yards rushing, rushing touchdown that was big that put Boise State ahead. You know, you mentioned the fans, the attendance, Ryan. There were a lot of Boise State fans there. Just from watching the game, you could hear them in the background. It was a good atmosphere. I don't know what it does to Ashton Genty's Heisman hopes. Still a pretty good performance, and he was a little banged up. The announcers during the commentary were talking about he may have had a left upper extremity injury. He seemed to be nursing it a little bit, but he usually always makes the first guy miss. This was the first time I really got to sit down and watch him play. And yeah, no, good game. Boise State, man, they're in position to maybe run the table and get a good seed in the college football playoff.
He had 128 yards on 33 carries and a touchdown. Rick, your thoughts on Boise State going into Vegas and walking out with a 29-24 victory?
I think UNLV obviously did the best job out of anyone so far. They limited him to under 4 yards a carry, 3.9 yards a rush. 33 carries to get 128 yards is quite a few carries for someone like him. And, he had 2 or 3 runs that were just on the verge of being broken. That's how special he is. But I was really more impressed with Maddox Madsen. And earlier in the night, I was talking trash about him, but he broke off, two of the biggest runs he's had all season. Coming into the game, he only had about 30 some odd yards rushing. In that game, he had 58 alone. So at the end of the second half, Malik Williams for UNLV really, in my eyes, lost the game for them, where he threw that pick in his own back of his own 10 maybe or 20, and Boise, scored right away. They scored 10 points in the last 2 minutes of the second half, and then we saw, or the first half, and then moving into the second half, it was really just a punt fest. I think they punted 4 or 5 possessions back and forth to each other. There was 4 3-and-outs in a row at one point, and then Genty finally scored at the beginning of the fourth. So great effort by UNLV. They just really slowed down in the second half and were not able to do anything. And you're mentioning over 40,000 in the crowd. Let's not forget that stadium holds 60,000. So it was nowhere close to being sold out, like I'm hearing the Colorado State stadium's going to be today. So great game. I was expecting UNLV to pull it out, but I was very happy. It was just a close one.
I was looking forward to it. I had this marked on my calendar when I saw the schedule come out, and when I was talking to everybody at Media Days in Vegas at Circa. UNLV is tied with Fresno State, New Mexico at 2-1 in the conference. Colorado State's 2-0. They have beaten Air Force and San Jose State. Jacob Neff is at a wedding today, so I'm going to do our You Bet Your Ass segment very quickly. I'm going to give out Neff's numbers. Illinois plus 22.5. West Virginia at Arizona in that traditional Big 12 matchup over 51.5. Texas A&M -1. His lock of the week, Toledo at 2.5. My picks, Navy at Notre Dame over 55.5. I would even take Notre Dame outright at plus 440. Like what they're doing, it's plus 14.5. I would take that spread, tease it up like I often do. Indiana 5.5. I do not care that Curtis Rourke is out. Kurt Cinetti. I love that name. Hey, it's Cinetti. It sounds like a New York cop. Hey, it's Cinetti. You don't work with a Cinetti, do you, Nick? All right, I'm crashing and burning on that joke. It just sounds like something that Rick and I, as one of our old friends, would make fun of. Hey, it's Cinetti. He's a crooked cop. 5.5. I think that line is dipped to 5. I think it opened up at 6.5. Washington's pass defense is pretty good. They really haven't played anybody. This Indiana team has been rolling. Travion Jackson will start for the 6th time in his career. I do like the Hoosiers. And College Game Day is there, and Big Fat Noon was there last week. And I'm not going to change anything over 62.5 in CSU and UNM. I also like, to many out there, Vanderbilt plus 18.5. And my lock, it's all about the U, baby, minus 21. I know that's a lot of points. There's been 2 things that have stunk this year, Florida State and my butt. So I'm going with Miami, and the games in Miami, I think they're out for blood. They know Florida State's reeling. It's the age-old rivalry. I'm hoping that Cam Ward is the next New York Football Giants quarterback, but be careful what you wish for. All right. I'm going to check out the comments real quick. John Romero, Texas Longhorns, hopefully get Pavia eyes today. It's only Fart Collins because Wyoming stink and CU blows. That's pretty good. Jacob Kennedy. I know a Jacob Kennedy. I don't think it's the same one. Beef Jake. Looking forward to a great game today. Go Rams. All right. I didn't mention this. And I don't know if Eric's going to regret it, but I probably will. You can now, where did it go? Oh, no. Yeah, you can call and text the show. 505-456-0547. I need to probably change the number to match what we're doing. But again, you can call and text the show. I will read it, and you can comment like you can on YouTube. I waited a solid 20 minutes to mention that. So 505-456-0547. It's just a random number that was created. I'm not going to tell you how I did it. I'm sure you can guess.
Cricket burner phone.
Yeah, Cricket burner phone.
Best Buy.
we have a friend that's a DA. I'm using it for my drug deals. I've been watching a lot of Sopranos and
Good.
What's the other show on Fox? FX, I mean.
I have to throw out there, Nick,
Go
since
ahead, Rick.
your dad's not here to rag on you today. You got a perfect costume going for Steven Seagal.
Okay.
Under Siege.
I got you.
Out, if you're running late, just put on. So I don't know what he wears, but he just got the overall look going, Nick. So
Fair enough, man.
Steven
Fair enough.
Seagal prepared.
Yeah, well, I'm sad that my dad's not here to give me a hard time, but good to be reminded. And yeah, no, I'll look that up. Steven Seagal, go for it.
Ryan, I just wanted to mention your thoughts here on the Colorado State and UNM line. It's gone down. I believe it opened at 6.5 or 7. Now it's sitting at 4.5, and the over/under has gone down to about 61. Usually you think that's just because a lot of money's coming in on the Lobos. Do you think that line was too high to begin the week, or do you think it should be at 4 or more at 6 where it started?
That's where I wanted to transition from my bad pop culture takes. I couldn't think of it. Sons of Anarchy. They always had a burner phone on it. And hey, Nick, watch License to Kill or Under Siege. I wish Neff was here. He knows it better than I. Obviously, the lineage in Vegas. I thought 6.5, again, my opinion, was just right. I know what UNM has done. I think CSU probably has a better defense. Obviously, Torrey Horton is out. We'll ask Justin Michael about that. I'm looking at Action Network now, and they like team total for New Mexico over 20.5. If it's dipping at 61.5, I will gladly take that over. We've had nearly 100 points in the last 2 games for UNM. They've dropped a 50 burger, 3 times in a row or 2? I mean, yeah. It's insane. I think anything, if it was still probably 6.5, 7 for UNM, I would take that. The 4.5, the dipping under the touchdown scares me. I don't know. We had mentioned, and it goes back all the way to July and August, those first 4 games were brutal. I'm not going to delve into it this morning, how much Montana might come back and bite them in the butt. This and Washington State might be the toughest test. I heard somebody call in and say that they can't beat Washington State. Can beat Washington State. I'm probably going to eat those words. Their offense has been pretty phenomenal. I think anything under 6, I'd probably take CSU. I fear like a turnover that could sway the game. I still like UNM's chances, but the over I'm taking all day, especially if it's dipping to 61.5. Go ahead, Rick.
One thing that Sean Ryder mentioned on the show he did with Justin Michael actually the other day, who we're going to have on later, is 2 of the Lobos running backs are banged up. Nakari Rogers and Javen Jacobs might not play today. They didn't practice every day this week. I don't know if they practiced the last day. They were on the depth chart for the game coming up, listed there. But based on what Sean had said, I think Nakari Rogers, who's really been the hammer the last 4 weeks, on short yardage, early downs, pounding the rock, and then Javen Jacobs, who's more the nail, the speed, the lightning out of the backfield, able to catch. He's played really well the last few games. So they're going to be giving Eli Sanders, I believe, the majority of the carries, and I think that's okay. The first 2 games, he really got 15 or more carries, I believe. And then they'll have Soljay Mavia Peters, the transfer from BYU, who's really just played out of that Wildcat set where he's getting the direct snap most of the time. So it'll be interesting to see what other running backs, if they have to use other running backs besides those 2 today, get into the mix. And I think, like you're saying, Ryan, that the Lobos can't afford to have multiple turnovers today. Maybe they can survive 1, but last week they had 4. And somehow, by the grace of God, we're still in that game. If they do that today, I don't think they're going to be in the game. We saw what happened against an Auburn or a Fresno. If you have too many turnovers or punts, the Lobos in the second half just kind of faded because their defense isn't able to hold. One thing, though, I'm not concerned about is the environment, right, that they're going to be playing in. Colorado State fan might say, oh, it's going to be loud and ruckus and hard for the Lobos. Well, they've already played in Death Valley at Auburn. They played at a tough stadium in Arizona and Tucson. So I don't think the noise and that's going to really be a factor, but it could be because a lot of Devin Dampier's snaps come off the clap, right? And if you can't hear the clap, that could be an issue for the timing of the offense, but the offensive line has looked very strong. So it's going to be interesting. I think I'm leaning with you, Ryan, that the Lobos will cover today, though.
Ryan, on the points,
go ahead, Nick.
I might go under on the points just because of Colorado State's style of play. It's kind of been talked about a lot. They really switched up their tempo from being more of an air raid style scheme to being a lot more balanced. I mean, if you look at their statistics, I think they run more than they throw. And this game kind of reminds me a little bit of how Fresno State started out. That's the last game that we lost. And our offense just really couldn't get anything clicking. If Colorado State gets into that ground and pound, really just controls the clock, I don't know if we see over 60 points in this game from UNM. Because last game, kind of after the first quarter against Utah State, our offense really got clicking. Things were moving. But we also see, like Rick pointed out, if Jacobs isn't playing, if Naquari Rogers isn't playing, UNM sometimes gets pass happy on early downs. And the worst thing that could happen for our offense is having 3 and outs early on. So I think that's just something to keep an eye on, how the tempo of the game goes. I think defensively, it's important for UNM to get stops early in the game so that Colorado State doesn't establish the tempo early on. If UNM is able to get the tempo the way they want it, I see the points going over 60. But if not, then I would take the under.
In regards to the over, there has been nothing. I'm sure it's going to hit once, but there has been nothing that this UNM team has done defensively to question that they can allow 30, 35, 40 points. And the offense has clicked very well. I think the one thing I'd like to probably point out is the fact that I thought UNM and Devin Dampier, he had that early pick, on the first drive last week. I don't want him to come out nonchalant. I don't think they can afford to do that this week. It might be, and I watched the Colorado State Air Force game last week, and it was, it looked like Colorado State was going to run away with it, and they looked like they didn't appear to care. Towards the end of the game, Air Force kind of put the clamps down, and I forgot Air Force's quarterback. And as I mentioned earlier on a show earlier this week, I'm not here to knock an airman, a cadet, or a midshipman, but he did more damage with his legs. His passes were not good. I want to go to the comments before we go to Justin Michael of DNVR. The Hondo 1976 has the Lobo defense improved during the year. They were tough on fourth down play and the interception last week, but the tackling has been poor all year. I will give credit where credit due, because maybe it's a learning experience. A stop on fourth down, you get a game-winning pick. They're back-to-back possessions. We haven't seen that. You might be able to ride that confidence high, but this defense, ever since the second half on Montana State, really hasn't done much for me to have any amount of confidence in them. And I know Bronco Mendenhall has talked about, a missed assignment here, a lack of concentration there. You get those things cleaned up. Who the hell knows? But we are sitting here at the end of October talking about Lobo football with UNM basketball right around the corner. Go ahead, Rick.
No, I was just say I would definitely agree. We mentioned it, in multiple shows. We haven't really seen the defense as a unit progress this year. It's been about the same game every game. So it really comes down to if they're going to be able to force any turnovers. Those have been the games the Lobos have been in, and really special teams play is going to be huge today. We forget about that a lot, but last week in the Lobos game, they muffed a punt because someone got pushed into Wysong on the return, and Utah State gets it. Later in the game, Utah State muffs a punt, right? And we get it, or maybe it was before. So those are the plays that are really going to come up big. I think Lobo punt returns should go to Wysong, obviously. I don't think Jacobs has been a good returner in my eyes this year. But on the defensive side, somebody just has to be able to make plays consistently. And to answer the question, we haven't seen any real improvement to the naked eye.
Yeah, Ryan, real quick, I'll just agree with that. You know, the times we talk about UNM's defense, they're making big plays in the fourth quarter. Look at what they did against Utah State last week. They get that interception on the game's last drive, and then they get a big stop on fourth down. The week before that against Air Force, I think they got a couple stops on fourth down and forced a fumble. So they make big plays, sometimes forcing turnovers. But Rick just hit the word perfectly. It's consistency. We need to see stops in the first, second, and third quarter. You need to get off the field on third down. I don't know if this defense is capable of taking that step this season, given the personnel that we have. But to win this game, to win Washington State in a couple weeks, they've got to make consistent stops first, second, and third quarter if they're going to have a chance.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I wanted to thank, before we take a quick commercial break and get to Justin Michael of DNVR, he covers the Rams as a beat reporter and podcast host on that site. I like PHX, and they look good. It's great. I sound like a guy running for president. Hey, it looks great. It's great. The football slate's great today. Dulce River Bakery and Coffee. Appreciate them sponsoring us. Love Armando over there and his wife Molly. Affordable Solar, Turquoise Desert Tap Room, Hydro Bar. Affordable Service, heating, plumbing, and air conditioning for your HVAC needs in the Albuquerque and Rio Rancho area. Affordable Service has been in business in New Mexico since 1986 and is still locally owned. During that time, they've served more than 40,000 customers, providing complete residential and light commercial HVAC services, including heating and cooling, electrical and plumbing. Affordable Service takes pride in its staff commitment to the Albuquerque and Rio Rancho community. Nick Nunez, Rick Thompson. My name is Ryan Tamori. This is the Pit Press Live. Quick commercial break, and we'll be right down to break down UNM at CSU later today. Kickoff is at 3 in Fort Collins.
Let him cook. Let him cook now. Let him cook. I said let him cook.
Before I get to Justin Michael, Nick, your dad wrote in because he couldn't join us. All XPX grads today. My son's hair actually looks better. I look forward to your performance in Under Siege 3. All right. Joining us from DNVR, he covers the Colorado State Rams. And where did he go there? Whoop. Perfect. There we go. He is a beat reporter for Colorado State. I love being a producer and hosting the show. I do a terrible job. DNVR, Justin Michael, he covers the Rams, and he's the podcast host there. Senor, how are you this morning? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me on.
I will start here. Colorado State finds itself at 4-3. Obviously, you can throw probably a game like Texas to open the season out of the radar. Are you finding the Rams right where they need to be, and then they're 2-0 in the Mountain West Conference?
Yeah, I mean, I think there have been some frustrating moments along the way, even outside of Texas, which is obviously just an outlier. I mean, they're very clearly one of the most athletic and talented teams in the country, but I mean, the non-conference slate as a whole was kind of frustrating. You know, they played Northern Colorado and UTEP, who looked fairly comparable in terms of competition versus like Texas and CU, who really kind of beat the Rams down, and that was disappointing to CSU fans. It was the first time they had CU at home, since 1996. So that was this huge missed opportunity. But the last month they've definitely played a lot tougher, and as you mentioned, they're undefeated in league play, so they're in a good spot comparatively. It's the first time they've had a winning record since 2017. I think the fans were hoping for maybe a little bit more early on in the year, in year 3 of the program under Norvell. But as a whole, I think they're in a pretty good spot, especially with the favorable schedule down the stretch.
I'm just going to veer off UNM for a second. Are you in favor of Colorado and Colorado State playing in both respective college towns and not at Mile High? Or excuse me, what is it? I'm going to call it Sports Authority Field.
Yeah, it's the brand has changed like 55 to
Empower
Field or whatever
That's
it is now. Yeah. It'll always be Mile High. I think the games are better on campus. I think the atmosphere was more electric. The caveat is when you played in Denver, about 30,000 more people get to go. So the tickets on campus are a lot more limited. They're a lot more expensive as a result. But the atmosphere was definitely a lot more fun. And I feel like college sports belong on campus, especially like the premier rivalry matchups and that type of stuff. I kind of hate when they put it in a neutral setting and dull it down a little bit.
No, I can understand that. I thought when they moved the series there back to Boulder and then in Fort Collins this year, I thought it was great. I mean, this is a generic cliche question. How much is this offense and Braden Fowler Nicolosi going to miss Torrey Horton?
A lot. I mean, he's one of the most talented receivers to ever come through the program. CSU's been fortunate to have some good ones over the years, but I mean, you can just look at the raw numbers when Torrey's been on the field versus when he hasn't. The passing offense has not clicked as much. They're starting to figure it out with some of the other guys, Armani Winfield, Caleb Goody. They've had some big plays in recent weeks, but Torrey was kind of that guy that was just his security blanket. Third down, we're looking for Torrey. Red zone, we're looking for Torrey. That puts a lot more pressure now on a lot more unproven players just across the board.
And hey, Justin, this is Ricky. Do you think that's kind of why the offense for Colorado State was, in my eyes, ineffective last week? I mean, Air Force's defense is one of the worst in the country, and they'll be going up one just as bad today against New Mexico. But what happened to the offense last week, and why did they not move the ball very effectively?
Yeah, I mean, I think losing Torrey is definitely a factor, just with the struggles they've had with the passing offense or the inconsistencies. I mean, they ran the ball really well. If they don't fumble on that opening series after going straight down the field, I think that kind of changes a lot in terms of just the early lead established and some momentum that they could have got going there. I mean, they were up 21-0, but yeah, I think you would have hoped for more against an Air Force defense. But that's also just a place that like the Rams have never seemed to play well. They hadn't won there since 2002. I've seen a lot of really good offenses go down there and just seemingly crumble. So maybe that's me being, I'm a CSU alum, a lifelong Ram guy. So like maybe that's me being apologetic and, making excuses. But at this point, it's like I was just happy to see them find a way to pull it out.
Justin, I had a question for you. Nick Nunez here. I wanted to ask you about the CSU defense. I think one of the themes of today's game is, how is CSU going to defend Devin Dampier? I looked at CSU stats from last week. They got 4 sacks on Air Force, and Air Force threw 25 times, which you normally don't see from an Air Force team. But one of the things I thought I saw Utah State do, at least in the first quarter, was kind of throw a spy at Devin Dampier, try to limit his running lanes. I did read in the Coloradoan written by Kevin Lytle, excuse me, that Jalen Gardner was kind of acting in that role as a rover for when Colorado State was playing Air Force. And I'm just wondering, do you see Colorado State doing something like that with Devin Dampier? I mean, he's very dynamic. He's a dual threat. But how do you see CSU trying to limit him, making him one-dimensional?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really intrigued to see how they handle it as well, because Gardner, basically questionable going into this game, got a concussion, I believe, in that Air Force matchup in the second half. So if they don't have him, that changes some things. I mean, they might put a guy like Jack Howell around him and see if he could do it. I'm not sure he has the speed, though, frankly. I mean, that's what I've been talking about on my show throughout the week, is that Dampier is dang scary. I mean, he is probably the most dynamic runner in the conference outside of Ashton Jeanty. He's so dangerous in the open field, that ability to, I mean, that he had that run against Utah State. I mean, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but where he goes all the way to the sideline, then still has the speed to get down. Like, you don't see that in this league. Frankly, I don't know if there's a player on the defense that is as fast as him, like at full stride, outside of like the DBs and stuff like that. And you're not going to put your corner on him as a spy. It's going to be tough. It's going to be big on the defensive ends to keep containment. I think one of the things the Rams did pretty well last week was generating pressure, but not losing that containment. And that's part of what made Air Force have to throw the ball so much as well. And obviously going down big was a factor there. But I mean, I think some of it is like a little bit of a hope and a prayer. I think you're going to try and throw a lot of different looks at him and see if you can confuse him. Obviously the turnovers at times have been a little bit of an issue for him. But I don't see a world in which Dampier is completely like made ineffective with his legs, because he's just so good at buying time. I mean, he's been my favorite player to watch in the league outside of Gianti. You
don't hear that a lot with UNM football around these parts the last 15, 16 years. UNM has a couple question marks at running back. Guys are banged up. They lost what we thought was going to be the starter, Andrew Henry. There was some controversy with his eligibility. Nikari Rogers came in, he played well. Javen Jacobs came in, he played well. They're both banged up. It's probably going to be Eli Sanders. But on the other side of the ball is Avery Morrow. He's had 622 yards off 96 carries and 6 touchdowns. Again, cliche question. I mean, how important has he been?
He's been massive. I mean, he's largely the reason the season didn't kind of fall apart there when the passing offense was having struggles. And I mean, the Rams basically completely changed offensive ideology about a week before the season, which we can get into, like whether they should have done that or not. I think they saw some things just with how they matched up against Texas, and they have a very experienced offensive line. And I think there's a part of just they looked back on last year and, they had some flashy passing stats, but they weren't very physical. They couldn't put teams away when they had leads. They blew games against CU, UNLV, and Hawaii. And at first, it was kind of a struggle. And especially with, Braden Fowler-Nicolosi under center, it just really kind of threw him for a loop. He wasn't in a rhythm. He wasn't seeing things as well. And they were able to lean on Morrow and Marshall, and it was they were kind of able to eke out just enough points to win some ugly games early. But now the last couple weeks, it's just been a lot more explosive. I mean, I think CSU has 21 rushes of 15 or more yards this season. They had 7 all of last year. Like he's been a game changer for them. And frankly, it's a very unique situation. I mean, he got in some trouble about a year and a half ago. I mean, very easily could be like it could have gone to prison in another life. And instead, he's been able to make the most of this second chance, which has been a cool redemption story. But yeah, I mean, especially with Torrey being hurt for a lot of this season without Avery, I mean, they might be like a 1 or 2 win team at the moment.
How does, and we're all over the place with our questions. I'm sorry. I was going to also ask.
No, it's
defense,
fun.
But,
yeah.
Who steps up? And it made me think of this question. Who steps up at wide receiver, maybe tight end as a patch? Remember when I told you I couldn't talk? As a pass catcher at tight end and wide receiver for this Rams team?
I think it really they brought in Armani Winfield in the offseason, who was a former 4-star recruit. I transferred over from Baylor. He had some drops early on in the season, and he had a really untimely fumble against Air Force, unfortunately, that allowed them to kind of hang around in the game. But he is much like Torrey Horton, the kind of guy where one touch can kind of break the game open. He's electric in the open field. He's got great speed. That's really been the Rams' issue as a whole these last couple of weeks, has just been the fumble issues, putting the ball on the ground. Like, Moro's had 2 in the last 2 weeks, so even though he's been incredible, that's an issue. And they've been really like frustrating ones in the red zone that have been killer. You know, they need Winfield. They need him to kind of figure it out with a little bit more consistency, but he's probably that number one guy. At tight end, Vince Brown, they brought over a guy, Jackson Warren, who they were really excited about in the offseason. He ended up injuring his shoulder in camp, so they haven't had him. I mean, it's kind of been the tail of the, or that's kind of been the tail for the Rams this year, has just been the injuries and untimely stuff. Like, Torrey got hurt early on. They lost what was supposed to be their star tight end. Justin Marshall was a young running back they were really excited about. He's been dinged up. They had another running back, Keegan Hollis, kind of break out. He hasn't been able to play in a month. It's been a little bit rough on the injury front. And so they kind of need like their transfers and some of these like freshmen and sophomores, frankly, to make some plays, which is always kind of an unnerving position to be in as a program.
I wanted to ask about Braden Fowler Nicolosi. I think for some reason, and this could be a terrible comparison, but it was like Alan Bowman going in Oklahoma State was like, kind of keep down the turnovers. He's thrown 6 touchdowns. He's had 5 interceptions. How would you rate his play?
I think he's been fairly solid. I mean, the turnovers as a whole, he's cut way down from where he was at last year. A lot of those picks were early in the season. I feel like he's done a pretty good job of managing the game and not putting the ball in harm's way as frequently. He's starting to run a little bit more, which has been big for the offense and just for him and cutting back some of those decisions. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he has made as many big explosive plays down the field as we would have anticipated coming in. But I think part of that has to do with the receiving core. I think part of that has to do with the scheme change. And I think part of that too, you know, you don't have Horton, but you also lost your star tight end, Dallin Holker, from last year. He's now on the Saints, and your 2 other leading receivers both hit the portal. So he just didn't really have a relationship with a lot of these guys that have had to step up and start basically. And it's been a little bit up and down. But he has pretty incredible arm talent. He makes some plays that are special. It's all about reining it in. And I mean, I imagine the staff to an extent has some similar comments about Dampier, although he's been so good. He's kind of forced to play Superman with the defensive woes. I don't really know how you can get on him too much, because it's like he's the only reason you're in these games.
No, trust us. We know that he's the only reason they're probably 3-4 right now. On the defensive side, I had the pleasure of meeting Jack Howl. His dad won a Super Bowl as a special teamer with the Bucks, probably an NFLer himself. Can you talk about his game and what he means to this defense?
Yeah, he's been a 4-year starter for the Rams. Him and Henry Blackburn have kind of held the unit together during some pretty tough times. Obviously, the Adazio era was just brutal for so many reasons. I mean, it was ugly football, and he was a bad dude. So it's like, not only do you feel bad about the fact that your school's getting beat down, you feel bad about the type of person that's representing your program in the first place. And it was really ugly. And like, outside of guys like Howl and Blackburn and Trey McBride, like there just wasn't much to feel good about. He's one of the guys, you know, as a CSU supporter, that like you're really hoping to see them break through and reach a bowl, because, you know, he's had bigger schools trying to get him to transfer for 2-3 years, but son of a CSU legend, he's been incredibly loyal. He's a big time playmaker for them in the open field, one of their best open field tacklers. I think he's going to definitely be a big factor in this matchup if he has a good game. Defense probably playing well. If him and Henry are struggling, you know, UNM's probably, you know, moving the ball with consistency. But I have so much love for guys like him, because as we all know, you know, especially as, you know, Mountain West programs, it's tough to hang on to guys like that flash as true freshmen and frankly could probably play at a lot bigger schools.
My head exploded when I saw Steve Adazio on ESPN. I was like, how the hell did he get that job? Rick, Nick, before I ask the last question, you guys, I love saying Rick, Nick, Ricky, Nick, do you have any questions for Justin before we let him go here?
Justin, could you just tell us a little bit what the environment's going to be like there today? I see this as a turning point game for both teams, you know, in the season, and Colorado State, obviously a huge game for them. I think I saw it was 95% sold out. What's the environment going to be like there today? And are people jacked up for the game there?
Yeah, I mean, it's homecoming weekend, so it's definitely going to be a really good crowd. A great start time, 3 p.m. Not so late that people have to leave early, which is kind of a tough factor sometimes with games in Fort Collins. It's a good hour and a half, 2 hours to Denver with traffic. So with these late games, a lot of the time it's hard to get people to hang around for the second half. 3 p.m. start. Hopefully, have a pretty solid atmosphere throughout. People are definitely excited, but I think also just with the way that CSU kind of left the door open, both against Air Force and San Jose State, which were both the types of wins that frankly CSU just never pulls off, at least over the last 10, 15 years. I still think there's a lot of waiting for the other shoe to fall. And I've kind of gotten that sense even from some New Mexico fans as well, talking about it. It's like, yeah, like we're excited. It's going in the right direction, but everybody's still kind of holding their breath. And frankly, I feel like this is a very validating moment for both programs one way or the other. If you're CSU, yeah, you beat New Mexico 12 times in a row, but this is such a different situation. And also, like, so many of those games could have gone the other way. There were so many coin flips. But I think it's one of those where if the Rams, they're able to play well and like get up, could get pretty rowdy, could get pretty, not like hostile, because I don't think there's any animosity towards New Mexico, but just a good, intense atmosphere. But I also think it's a situation where, if New Mexico strikes first, they get up early. It could get pretty quiet in there, because that's kind of the expectation at this point with CSU fans, because they've seen it time and time again over the last 20 years. Every time we start to buy in, boom, the other shoe falls, and we all feel stupid for buying in. So it's a big moment, and it's a scary matchup against New Mexico and Dampier. I've been nervous about it since the beginning of the year, but also it's been cool because I think I had him as QB3 in the conference coming into this season. That was too low on him. I was higher on him than most people. Now I'm just excited to watch him play in person.
Justin, real quick, how big is this game for Jay Norvell? I think his tenure has been a little up and down in the first 2 years. This season, a little bit of a rocky start. I think that game against Colorado, a lot of CSU fans were a little disappointed about how they came out. That game against Oregon State, double overtime, CSU had their chances. If you look at the rest of the schedule for Colorado State, these are all winnable games. I mean, Nevada, Wyoming, Utah State, winnable. But it seems like on homecoming, at home, when you're 4-3, 2-0 in conference play, this is kind of a big game for Jay Norvell.
Yeah, I think they're all big at this point. I mean, that CU matchup was such a marquee moment for the program coming in. And honestly, it's like not even really fair to put as much weight into that matchup as we do, but that's just how it works. Those are the matchups that the fans want. The rivalry games are what they care about. That Air Force win definitely bought him some goodwill. I mean, they hadn't beat Air Force since 2015. They were 1-20 in their last 21 rivalry games before that, CU, Air Force, and Wyoming. So the fact that he pulled that one out, that definitely, that helped. But given that the schedule is so favorable down the stretch, given that you played 7 home games, you got CU and Wyoming at home this year, I think there was a lot of expectation that like this team with the experience they had should be a 7 and 8 win team or something like that. And if you lose this game, all of a sudden you got a pretty tough trip coming up to Reno, and then you got a Wyoming team that's always going to come in hungry, even if they're struggling, can never discount a rivalry game. So this is one of those where, like, if you win it, it just gives you a little bit of leeway, I think, and just gives you a little bit more, I don't know, like benefit of the doubt. But I think they need to put together like a complete convincing performance before the doubt really goes out the window, because while it was good to beat that Air Force team, like we all know it, that's not a good Air Force team this year. You should have beat them. This is the type of game where, I know you're favored and all that, but like this is such an electric New Mexico offense. I almost think winning this game with a big crowd, that might even do more for generating support, just because the last couple of years, whenever we've had these big atmospheres like the CU game, the Rams have really laid an egg. So like they got to show up when the people show up, or at some point they just tune out because what's the point? You know, it just becomes all too familiar and it all feels inevitable.
I had the pleasure of covering the Mike Loxley years at UNM, and since then it's almost like my metaphor is the plane doesn't even get off the ground; it blows up before it takes off.
How crazy is it that guy has been able to revive his image?
You're speaking to the choir. You're preaching to the choir. Trust me. It's called
Nick Saban is a miracle worker.
It's called Nick Saban's rehabilitation program. I don't necessarily want. I have two, and I'm Justin. I appreciate your time, Justin Michael from DNVR. He covers Colorado State, the Rams. He's a beat writer and hosts a podcast there. And my dad used to see a doctor at CU Boulder. That has nothing to do with Colorado, University of Colorado. But I used to really love downtown Denver, and Coors Field is up there with many of the ballparks I've been. I don't hate on Denver. I love Denver. I don't want a prediction, but how do you see this game going today?
I think it's going to be back and forth. I think CSU is a much improved run defense than from what they've been the last couple of years, and that's big. But I have so much respect for what basically Dampier does individually, but also, I mean, that offensive line, it's a big credit to them. He's not the easiest quarterback to block for with the way he's able to improvise. The Rams, even though they have been better, they still tend to give up some big explosive plays. And that's been a big equalizer. New Mexico's great at striking on those. That makes me nervous. I mean, I do feel like CSU should be able to move the football on this New Mexico defense, should be able to run the ball well. But I think the big equalizer one way or the other is turnovers, you know, who's kind of able to play more disciplined, who's able to not beat themselves. And then ultimately whoever does that, I think probably pulls this one out.
And before I let you go, I'm gathering you do cover college basketball with it right around the corner. What is your outlook? We had the pleasure of meeting Nick Clifford and Jalen Lake a week ago, Rick and I at Mountain West Conference basketball meeting. Yeah, no, they're great. And Nico Medved, I didn't have the pleasure of talking to him this year. I did last year. He was great, lovely on Rice. But what is the outlook for Colorado State basketball this year, very quickly?
Yeah, I think there's some optimism, still some excitement, especially with Clifford coming back. I think that kind of drastically shifted the view. But, I mean, they lost 5 of their 6 leading scorers, 6 of their 8 leading players from a minute standpoint this past year. So it's a lot of new pieces. I think they added some talent. I think they have some little bit more versatility just with being able to go small or throw a bigger lineup out. The one thing is, having a guy like Isaiah Stevens be there for 5 years, it was such a blessing, but you knew like he's going to be out there 38 minutes a night. They didn't have a ton of length that they could throw at teams at times. And I thought some bigger teams kind of bullied the Rams as a result. So I'm interested to see, maybe they're a little bit more stout defensively in that regard. But it's going to be tough. I mean, they lost a lot of their offensive production. They need some guys to step up in a major way. And, the 2 guys that you met are going to be a big factor for them if they're going to have any type of success. I'm super excited to see what New Mexico does, though. Dent is, again, I love New Mexico. I think I took some heat during all this conference realignment stuff because I am excited for the future with CSU. But admittedly, like, it kills me to think that, oh man, we're not going to go to the pit as consistently anymore. Albuquerque is one of my favorite spots to go to. So I've got a lot of love for New Mexico, and I appreciate you guys having me on, and I'm sorry for rambling. I'm a solo host, so I'm used to just talking until my voice gets tired.
No, I try not to, I tell my guests, tell our guests 15, 20 minutes, but if you're willing to talk, you're willing to talk. He is from DNVR. He covers Colorado State Rams. He's a beat writer, and he hosts a podcast there. Pleasure to meet you. His name is Mr. Justin Michael. I'm going to bug you in the future.
I'd love to come on again. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. Hey, enjoy college football. Enjoy your weekend. All right. When we come back, we are going to get Mr. Ed Nunez. I thought, let's just bring him on right now. Yeah, he's the voice of the Western New Mexico Mustangs, and he's in beautiful Silver City right now. His name is Mr. Ed Nunez, and he's been a Lobo fan since 1970. Ed, how you doing?
Hey, great guest. He sounded almost like somewhat of a New Mexico fan. I listened to what he said, and a lot of great takes. And it seems like one of the things he said that really struck out to me is the conference's perception. He's from Colorado State, of Devin Dampier, and he said that. And you said that, Ryan, and I think Nick and Rick, you said it too. He's someone they have to game plan for. He's somebody that we haven't seen here with that kind of ability in a long time to make the plays with his feet and his arm. And, when people start saying that outside the conference, outside of our little circle here, what they perceive as his talents, it's great. It's great to hear. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, I just hope they can keep him here. So I thought he was a great guest, and he gave New Mexico a lot of love, talked about the pit. And, you guys had some great questions. And, son, I got to tell you, man, your hair looks a little bit better than I thought, man. You're doing all right with it.
The annual your hair comment just
it used to be weekly. I
had one thing on Dampier because we're just kind of giving him some light here.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, there's only 2 quarterbacks right now in all of college football that have double-digit passing TDs and double-digit rushing TDs. That's Jalen Milroe at Alabama and Horvath at Navy. Well, Dampier has 10 rushing TDs and 9 passing, I believe, or one or the other. So he's just one behind those. That shows, he's up there with the most dynamic playmakers in the entire country if there's only that amount of guys that have passed and rushed for each. But looking forward to just being able to retain him, I think he has to recognize what this offense is built all around him. And this offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, has really schemed this offense to make him shine. And I just hope that he keeps that in mind when he's making his decision. Like we heard Donovan Dent during media day when he was on field of 68, they straight up asked him, why did you make the decision to return to UNM when you're getting these big offers? And for him, it was part of the Albuquerque community, understanding how much the fans buy into the basketball program. And that means a lot to him. So I think if we're going to retain Dampier, these final home games at UNM, it's going to be imperative for fans to show out, whether they win or lose, because we need to show him and the team that the community supports them if we want to retain the best players like we did on the basketball side. Obviously losing Toppin, but still retaining Amzil, Dent, and Nelly. So I just think the same logic has to be applied to football.
Let me interject there. I don't disagree with you at all. And Mackenzie Bishop, who's been a great guest for us, has said UNM's done a great job with the NIL. You know what, though, Rick? And you know what? There's always a Raymond Session in the back, like there was in the background talking to JT Toppin, right? And it just depends on the individual. Raymond Session talked him into, hey, you should be going somewhere bigger. Sessions had played in the NBA, and he's telling JT, you don't need to be here, right? So we don't know about the influence of outside people. We don't know about that. Now, I agree with everything you said. I want him to stay. I would cry if he left. I really wouldn't, but I would be, devastated because he's done he's I think, Nick, you might have mentioned, or someone, I think your guest did, Ryan, about he's hard to block for the offensive line, and Ned James alluded to that. The offensive line is solid, he said, but Dampier gets out of a lot of sacks because of his elusiveness. So he's somebody we haven't seen, some of these talents whose talents we haven't seen around here in a long time. But there's always the outside influence, Rick, about Ramon Sessions or somebody in his ear saying, hey, man, and you're right about the offense being tailor-made here. All of that is true. But then there's always the outside influence that, hey, man, you can go over here to X university. And look, I'm speaking realistically. I don't want that to happen. This is reality now in 2024, 2025. That's the way it is. So hopefully, Rick, to your point, I plan on going next week. I'll be there at the stadium for sure. I'm going, so hopefully they keep this rolling. But I think those are good points, which you said. But we have to be realistic, too, that's what happened to JT Toppin. He had one guy in his ear, saying, hey, you need to leave. By the way, I want part of what you get. And there's always somebody there trying to make something, and let's face it, New Mexico doesn't have that program that's been established in football. They don't. They're trying to get there. Today's win would move them towards establishing a culture here. They've got a long way to go. Let's be honest. They do. I'm hoping they can get there. They play better. But to keep a guy like Dampier, it's going to be a challenge. There's no doubt about it. Donovan Dent was a challenge. They kept him. They kept Amzil. You mentioned the other players they kept. Dampier, you mentioned, Rick, he's only one of 2 quarterbacks with 10 rushing and 10 passing, or 9 passing. And so that's in the nation. So, yeah, of course, there's people waiting to see if they can get him. As we speak, they're talking about it. So hopefully that doesn't happen. And we just got to be realistic about it. And hopefully, like you said, Rick, he'll find out that he likes the community here and the program is on the rise. Hopefully all those things are true.
Rick, I know you got to jump off. I just want your thoughts on today's game.
Yeah,
Make a prediction.
Final pick for me. I'm going to go UNM 45, CSU 42 with the over. Just so you all know, I am 6-2 on my my spread picks this year. So I'm pretty locked in on the Lobos. I think they got it today. Thank you guys, and we'll talk to you next time.
Take care, Rick.
Appreciate it, Rick. Thank you. Ed, I just want your thoughts on today's game. What do you think is going to happen?
You know what? In listening to it, and both Rick and my son and you, Ryan, you guys ask great questions. My son I call him the research king, will research articles from Colorado State. That's what he does. So he goes and does his homework. And listening to you and then your guest, it made me think a lot about it. And remember what Ned James had? We had him on Monday. He said both lines of CSU are big. The offensive line for CSU is big. Their defensive line is big. They're bigger than us on both lines of scrimmage. But even your guest said he thinks Dampier, they can move the ball. He thinks Colorado State will move the ball. But even he seemed to be edging towards New Mexico. It kind of surprised me. I'll take New Mexico 31-27. I think they keep it going. And it's going to be a tough, there'll be some, I think, Nick, you said that. New Mexico needs to get off the field on third down. Then you get some sacks. Son, you and I watched the game last week together, and we had a blast, man. We don't get to watch New Mexico wins together very much, and we had a blast watching that. So I think New Mexico keeps it going. They win 31-27 today.
Nick, your thoughts?
I'm going to take the under, Ryan. I know you think I'm crazy. This UNM defense has given us no indication that they can stop anybody. But I just think CSU is going to establish the tempo fairly early on. And I'm optimistically hopeful that this UNM defense can generate some pressure, stop the run enough. I'm going to take UNM 31-24, the under. And again, I'm hoping that Dampier can make enough plays with his legs and with his arm. We'll see what the running game looks like without Javen Jacobs and Aquari Rogers. But I think Soljay Maava-Peters, we'll probably see more of an emergence of him, probably being an every down back. We need Wysong to have a strong game and the receiving core as a whole. We'll see if Caleb Medford plays. He's been a little bit up and down, but Nick Trujillo has been fairly good in the pass game. Trace Bruckler, the tight end, has also been a weapon that Dampier has used. So again, just eyes on the UNM defense. Hopefully they generate enough to get stops. My final prediction, UNM 31, CSU 24.
If you're listening in from Colorado, this is kind of an unusual thing where there's a lot of confidence, I think, in UNM. I think this game can go both either ways. I'm not trying to, I don't want to not give like my take or whatever. And predictions I think are sometimes funny, but it gives us content to talk about. I can see UNM winning this game. I can also see CSU winning game. Why do they play the games? Why are you tuning in to this, listen to this guy say, hey, I think both teams can win the game. If there's one thing I'm certain, I think the over, and if it's dipped to 61.5, that thing keeps dipping, take it. I do like UNM's chances here. What, they haven't beaten them in Fort Collins since 2002 or something insane like that, and they've lost several in a row. I was at the game 2 years ago, 2-3 years ago, where they just got pummeled by one of Danny Gonzalez's teams. CSU just got pummeled by UNM, got pummeled by CSU. I wouldn't be shocked if they hung a 50 burger. I wouldn't be shocked if they gave up 50. I can definitely see this be like 52-49, 55-52. I just don't know how you stop, UNM's offense, but I don't know how UNM's offense stops CSU. They do have some talented guys. I know they're missing Torrey Horton. Braden Fowler-Nicolosi is, I don't, people early on called him a terrible quarterback. I think in the grand scheme of things in the Mountain West, he might be really good, but it's cool to see how much love Devin Dampier is getting. Jacob Kennedy. Yeah, I could see that. 49-35 Rams. I really could see that. Lost my train of thought there. I don't know. I think it's going to be another exciting game. I just don't think that UNM can come out flat like they did last week. You're going to say something, Nick?
Yeah, do you remember the last time UNM beat CSU? I mean, we can obviously look back, but I remember I was at the game. I was at the game. It was my junior year of high school in 2009. I think it might have been the last game of the year. And UNM obviously hadn't won a game. Those were the Mike Loxley days.
Yeah, that's right. I was there for that. Stump Godfrey, a quarterback.
Yeah. So I cannot believe it's been that long, man. I mean, it really kind of shows our age, I guess. But
don't say it to your dad.
Well, anyway, but yeah, man, I still remember the last time we beat them. It's been a lot of painful losses, some close, some lopsided. But let's just see. I just want us to compete today. We'll see what happens.
Well, I want to get the hell out of here because I've been infatuated with Navy and Army football, and I love me some Air Force. Sean O'Toole. I got to queue up Kenny Loggins. I want to thank Justin Michael from DNVR up in Denver, Colorado. He covers Colorado State and hosts a podcast for the Rams. Rick Thompson, Ed, sorry, thanks for joining us late. At least getting 15 minutes on here. What's on tap at Western?
Western New Mexico versus Eastern New Mexico Green Chili Bowl, 12 noon. Western beat Eastern last year in a wild one, man. Eastern missed a 47-yard field goal at the gun. So both teams kind of struggling. We've lost 4 straight. We've lost 5 straight. Eastern has lost 4 straight. So something's got to give today. Hopefully it's a Western New Mexico victory.
I'm surprised the UNM and NMSU is not called the Green Chili Bowl. I know it's a Battle of I-25. I'm going to throw this out there again. We will come to you live Monday. We'll recap the Colorado State game, and then we will preview the exhibition between UNM men's basketball and Richard Pitino's Lobo and Joe Golding's UTEP Miners. We're going to try to do bigger and better things here. You can call into the show, give your thoughts. I'll probably beat that to death on Monday. Hopefully we'll have Ned James on, but we'll come to you Monday at 4:00, and then we'll be leading you into that exhibition game with UTEP. I want to thank Rick Thompson. Richard. Nick, pleasure to see you. Congratulations on getting hitched. And Mr. Ed Nunez, enjoy today. I hope you enjoy that football game. We will talk to you Monday. Always hit us up on Twitter. Excuse me, the artist formerly known as X. Our YouTube page is at the Pit Press. Social, Instagram, the Pit Press. And then Facebook. I don't get on Facebook much. Eric does a lot of that. So appreciate everybody watching us, and talk to you on Monday. Enjoy college football and enjoy the rest of your weekend and the cooler weather. Everybody have a good one. Weather.